Welcome to Techstination. Joining us is Ted Cardenas, Vice President of Marketing at Pioneer Electronics USA. Thanks for joining us, Ted.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Well, Pioneer, of course, is a legendary name in electronics and especially car electronics these days. And you've got some new products coming out. One is sort of a departure for you because I don't think it has much to do with sound. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the announcement we've made for 2019 is a completely new category for us, at least in the aftermarket, and that is our entrance into the consumer telematics. And telematics is such a long historical word over the last decade or so, but what it boils down to for the consumer is now this is a device that allows the vehicle owner. It's actually less about driving the car and more about owning the vehicle. And this is a product that plugs into the OBD2 port of vehicles made from 1996 or newer. Almost every vehicle has one of these, and it reads the vehicle bus data, but it also has its own LTE network connection. And so this is the first product to bring LoJack, very well-known vehicle theft recovery service over many decades, now into the aftermarket. So you can literally purchase the Pioneer rDrive device, plug it into your vehicle, and have vehicle theft recovery. But it doesn't stop there. It also provides a service called CrashBox, which is monitoring vehicle force. So it can detect a collision or an accident. It can notify the authorities. It can attempt to contact the driver. But again, as the vehicle owner, if that was one of my loved ones who was driving, I get a real detection of an accident, but also it is smart enough to know what is not an accident. So I'll never get a false positive that my loved one was in an accident when in fact they just hit a pothole. But it also gives some geo services. So for example, again, if it's my loved one, maybe I have a teen driver, or for example, my actual case, my father is in his 80s, but he's still very active. I could put one of these devices in his car and know when he decides to drive off to see one of his grandchildren, or maybe I can set a arrival or departure notification so I know when he's gone to the park or gone to the gym or gone to the doctor's office, whatever it may be. So it brings an entire suite of what we call geo services or telematic services now into the vehicle. But to your point, it's quite a departure from entertainment. It's more about reassurance, peace of mind, and knowing where the vehicle is, whether or not it's been stolen, or if the driver of that vehicle is where we want them to be.
And you'll have two different models of the rDrive?
Yeah, so initially we'll have one model, which just brings that suite of telematic services. Later this summer of 2019, we will bring a second device that has that same suite of telematic services, but then also adds an AT&T powered Wi-Fi hotspot. So now you can bring more entertainment and productivity of having that always on internet connection in the vehicle as well.
Well, tell us how it's going to work with pricing. I assume you're buying a device and then there are subscription services?
Actually, with Pioneer's rDrive device for 2019, the first model, which is what we are about to launch, actually has a retail price of about $300. That includes the first year of the telematic services, so the entire suite of LoJack, CrashBox, the theft detection, the geofencing, all of that is included in that retail price, including the network connection. Later this summer, we haven't quite defined the price of the device that will have the Wi-Fi hotspot, but that will have the same included in the retail price, telematic services. But the Wi-Fi hotspot part, you would then activate on a data plan with AT&T directly, and it will be very similar in price to any other automotive-based Wi-Fi hotspot services.
Really interesting. So those are coming this spring and later in the summer, the two different devices. And then you've got some new in-dash receivers that have some unique features for you that are now on the market under, is it called NEX or NEX?
Yes, NEX is it's a little bit of a play on words. It's what we actually introduced several years ago. It was the first model was 2014 was when we introduced the nomenclature of NEX. And the play on words is that it's the next generation of car electronics because it's a lot closer to the smartphone or tablet that many consumers already have. versus a traditional car stereo. It has a mobile operating system. It has a multi-core processor. It has a lot of embedded RAM. But the key feature that it enabled in both 2014 and 2015 was the implementation of Apple CarPlay in 2014 and respectively Android Auto in 2015. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are interfaces designed by those respective companies, Apple and Google, to bring the best of the smartphone content that you'd want to use while you drive into the vehicle and make it very easy and simple to operate, very intuitive. The key factor in both of those services is almost everything is done by voice. So you simply ask, respectively, Apple CarPlay using Siri to set your destination, search for locations, play music, answer phone calls, make and receive phone calls, but even read back text messages to you and dictate text messages to the system entirely by voice. You never see any text on the screen. And then Android Auto, which came a few months later, does the exact same thing for Android users. The significant now, when we fast forward to 2019, is Pioneer, in partnership with both Apple and Google, have products that will do that connection wirelessly. A few years ago, you had to plug in the phone, make a USB connection between the Pioneer receiver and the phone. Now we have an embedded Wi-Fi chip specifically just to talk between either the iPhone device or the Android device that enables that same functionality, but now you can leave your phone in your pocket, in your purse, in your bag, because all of the interface that you want to do happens in the Pioneer car radio, but all of the connectivity and the interface and everything else is coming from the phone, completely wire-free. So it's a really great user experience. It's really seamless, very easy to use. You just simply get in the car, it automatically connects, and you have all of your content right there, literally at your fingertips, but more importantly, just simply through voice commands.
And you've opted to use Wi-Fi over Bluetooth wireless technology.
Yeah, that actually is, it's a specification defined by both Apple and Google respectively, but certainly implemented by Pioneer and others that have this technology. Wi-Fi certainly has a much higher bandwidth than Bluetooth because so much of the content that's is displayed on the screen, the mapping, the user interface, certainly the voice in real time, going between our device and our microphone into the phone, up into the cloud, it is quite a bit of amount of data. And so Bluetooth doesn't quite have the bandwidth, obviously, that Wi-Fi does. And so they, both Apple and Google respectively, have defined that wireless connection of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto utilizes Wi-Fi.
And you've got a few different versions of the new wireless NEX radios. They're more than a radio. Tell us about them.
Yeah, so we have, for 2019, we have 3 different models, and it really depends on how many features and how many kind of the latest technologies that you want. The first is our flagship model, and that is model number AVIC-W for wireless, 8500 NEX. That is our flagship receiver. So that includes not only Apple CarPlay wirelessly, Android Auto wirelessly. Of course, you can still plug in both via USB, but it also has a very robust embedded navigation. Both of those interfaces, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, obviously rely on the cellular connection to the phone. So if you drive in an area that maybe doesn't have a great cellular connection, you can still use the embedded navigation of the Pioneer system to have a very detailed map operation. We also have in that flagship model a 7-inch capacitive touchscreen. So a very high-end, responsive, very crisp-looking, but also very responsive in terms of touch is in that flagship model. When we step down one, then that gets to our AVIC-W 6500 NEX, and that goes to a slightly smaller screen, uses a resistive type instead of a capacitive touchscreen, still has the embedded navigation, but because we go to a little bit smaller screen, it doesn't quite meet the specifications that are required for Android Auto. So that product actually only features Apple CarPlay, both wired and wirelessly. And then there's a third model, which is our AVH now, W4500 NEX. That goes back to a 7-inch screen. So that gives us the capability of doing both Apple CarPlay wired and wireless and Android Auto wired and wireless. But we remove the embedded navigation. So now it has all of those same kind of entertainment features, the larger screen, connectivity to both smartphone user interfaces, but removes the embedded navigation to bring the price down a little bit. Respectively, those three units have a retail price of about $1,200 at the top, $900 for the 6500, and $700 for the 4500.
And with the 4500, would people be able to use the navigation apps from their phone as an alternative and have that display on the screen?
Yes, absolutely. Both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto on the phone will actually display Apple Maps for Apple CarPlay. Android Auto will display Google Maps. And in a really interesting move last year, Waze was able to implement both on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So consumers that really love the Waze interface, and there's so many, myself included, you can utilize that using Apple CarPlay on an iPhone or Android Auto on an Android device. So it really does bring a really seamless user experience for calling, messaging, music, and maps off of the phone.
Terrific. And tell me about the market for these kinds of entertainment devices, car entertainment devices, the in-dash receivers. Is it mostly people with older vehicles who don't have any of the technology that they're getting from dealers today?
Yeah, it's, the aftermarket has always had a little bit of a delay in terms of new cars versus aftermarket. But what is really unique about today's situation is obviously with the smartphone evolving so quickly, most consumers today are buying a new smartphone at least every 1 or 2 years as models progress. But most of us are holding on to our cars much longer than that. It's obviously a much larger investment. The average age in the United States of the vehicles on the road is actually about 11 and a half years. And that's data that comes directly from the Department of Transportation. There are about 230 million vehicles on the road. So you can imagine that if we're buying in the technology of a smartphone, either an Apple Car or an iPhone or an Android device is evolving every 12 to 18 months, but our vehicle is 11 years old, the technology certainly isn't keeping up. So the aftermarket gives us the opportunity to bring that latest technology, the smartphone interface, but even embedded navigation, entertainment sources like Pandora, Spotify, internet radio, satellite radio, even the best in terrestrial radio with HD radio. All of those sources, as they evolve, now can be brought into whether that vehicle is a year old or 2 years old or 11 years old. So it really gives that consumer the opportunity for a much smaller investment when we compare it to buying a new car, the latest technology you can find in a new car by simply replacing the radio.
Exciting stuff. So where can people go for more information?
So our website is www.pioneerelectronics.com. And we obviously have all of the information about all of our products, not just these products, but all of the products that we make for the vehicle. And then we are very fortunate to also be quite widely distributed. So you can go to any of the Pioneer authorized retail partners in practically any city in the United States and find more information and even how to get this into your vehicle.
Terrific. Ted Cardenas, thank you for taking the time with us.
Fred, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Now this. How many companies out there have continued to innovate when it comes to building a better radio? I'm Fred Fishkin, host of Techstination, and I'm here to tell you about the new CC Skywave SSB radio from the wonderful people at C. Crane. Bob and his crew really love radio, and it shows in this new compact model that is packed with features. Beyond great AM and FM reception and sound, you can tune into shortwave signals from around the world, listen to ham radio operators, aviation, and more. It's the radio you'll turn to every day, and in emergencies. It will run for nearly 3 days on just 2 AA batteries. Pair the sleep timer with the new Soft Speaker 3, and you've got the perfect radio for your nightstand. Of course, it can wake you up too. Click on C-Crane at Techstination.com and put in the code Techstination for a free flashlight with your order. They love radio, and you'll love C-Crane.